My wife said, "You're an adult. Cook for yourself." I'm not running a restaurant, so I did. My name is David, I'm 32, and I work as a field technician for an industrial equipment company. Most days I'm out there fixing machinery in warehouses, factories, sometimes construction sites, and my shifts run anywhere from 12 to 14 hours depending on how bad things break down. I'm married to Linda. She's 29, and she has two kids from her previous marriage, Ryan, who's 11, and Sophie, who's 8. When we first started dating about 5 years ago, everything felt right, you know? We'd cook together on weekends. She'd try these new recipes she found online. I'd grill steaks in the backyard, and the kids would set the table like it was some kind of game. We'd sit down together, talk about our days, laugh at Ryan's terrible jokes, and Sophie would show us her drawings from school. It felt like a real family, the kind I always wanted growing up. After we got married 3 years ago, Linda decided to quit her office job and go freelance as a graphic designer so she could be home more with Ryan and Sophie. I supported that decision completely because I saw how much she cared about being there for them, picking them up from school, helping with homework, making sure they had a parent around. But somewhere along the way, things shifted in a way I didn't notice at first. I started covering more and more of the bills, which made sense since my income was steady and hers fluctuated with projects. The mortgage, the car payments, groceries, utilities, the kids' school supplies, their sports fees, everything gradually landed on my paycheck. I told myself it was temporary, that once her freelance work picked up, we'd balance things out again. Months turned into a year, then 2 years, and nothing changed. I didn't complain because I figured that's what you do when you love someone. You carry the weight when they need you to. But I started noticing other things too, small things that added up. Dinner wasn't ready when I came home anymore, even on days when I texted her my schedule. The house wasn't messy exactly, but it wasn't the way it used to be either, like nobody really cared if I walked into clean space or chaos. Linda spent a lot of time on her laptop, which I assumed was work, but sometimes I'd see her scrolling through social media or chatting with friends while the kids watched TV. I'm not saying she wasn't doing anything. She was definitely busy with the kids and her projects, but it felt like I'd become invisible unless there was a bill to pay or something that needed fixing. Then came that Thursday in late July. I remember it perfectly because it was one of those days that just breaks you down piece by piece. I got called out at 6 in the morning to a factory 2 hours away where their main conveyor system had completely died overnight. The place was like an oven, no air conditioning in the work area, just industrial fans pushing hot air around, and it was 95 degrees outside. I spent the entire day in that heat, crawling under machinery, troubleshooting electrical panels, replacing burned-out motors, and by the time I finished it was almost 8 at night. My shirt was soaked through with sweat, my hands were covered in grease and small cuts from sharp metal edges, and I hadn't eaten anything except a protein bar I found in my truck around noon. The drive home felt endless, and all I could think about was getting home, taking a shower, and having a real meal. I pulled into the driveway a little after 9, walked through the front door, and the house was quiet except for the TV in the living room. Ryan and Sophie were in their rooms, probably getting ready for bed, and Linda was on the couch with her laptop. I dropped my work bag by the door and went straight to the kitchen, hoping maybe there were leftovers from dinner I could heat up. I opened the fridge and saw some sandwich stuff, a few yogurts, half a pizza from 2 days ago that looked questionable, but nothing that resembled a meal someone had saved for me. I stood there for a second, just staring into the fridge, feeling that exhaustion settle into my bones. I walked back to the living room and asked Linda if there was anything for dinner. She didn't even look up from her screen. "We ate at 6, she said, like I should have known. "There's stuff in the fridge." I told her I just got home, that I'd been working for 14 hours in brutal heat, and I was really hoping for something more than sandwich supplies. That's when she finally looked at me, and her expression wasn't sympathetic or apologetic, it was annoyed. "You're an adult," she said coldly. "Cook for yourself. I'm not running a restaurant." Those words hit me like a physical thing, like someone had shoved me backward. I just stood there looking at her, waiting for her to realize how harsh that sounded, waiting for her to soften and say she didn't mean it that way. But she just went back to her laptop like the conversation was over. I didn't say anything else. I just turned around, went back to the kitchen, and made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like I was 10 years old again. I ate it standing at the counter, and with every bite, I felt something crack inside me, some assumption I'd been carrying about what marriage was supposed to be. I kept thinking about my parents. My dad worked construction his whole life, long hours, hard physical labor, and my mom always had dinner ready for him when he came home. Not because she had to, not because he demanded it, but because she cared about him and wanted him to have that after a long day. It wasn't about gender roles or old-fashioned thinking. It was about love and consideration, about seeing your partner work themselves to exhaustion and wanting to take care of them. That's what I thought I had with Linda, that same kind of partnership. But standing there with that sad sandwich, I realized I'd been fooling myself. When was the last time she asked how my day was and actually listened? When was the last time she did something just because she thought it would make me happy? I couldn't remember. The thought that scared me most wasn't the cold dinner or the harsh words. It was the question that came after them. Was I just a paycheck to her? Was I just the guy who kept the lights on and the mortgage paid while she lived the life she wanted? I didn't have an answer that night, but I knew something had fundamentally changed. I finished my sandwich, took a long shower, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Linda slept next to me like nothing had happened. That phrase kept echoing in my head. You're an adult. Cook for yourself. And I realized she was right about one thing. I was an adult, and maybe it was time I started acting like one by taking care of myself, because clearly nobody else in this house was going to do it. I just didn't know yet that taking care of myself was going to look very different from what she expected. The next morning, I woke up with a weird clarity, like my brain had spent the whole night processing what happened and came to a conclusion while I slept. I wasn't going to argue with Linda. I wasn't going to beg for her attention or care. I was just going to do exactly what she told me to do, take care of myself. If she wanted to treat me like a roommate who paid all the bills, then fine, I'd act like one. That Friday, I left for work before anyone was up, stopped at the grocery store on my way home, and bought food specifically for myself, things I actually liked that nobody else in the house ever touched. Good steaks, fresh vegetables, the expensive coffee I always skipped because it seemed wasteful, some craft beer I'd been wanting to try. When I got home around 7 that evening, Linda and the kids had already eaten something, I don't even know what, and she was back on the couch with her laptop. I didn't ask about dinner, didn't mention anything, just went straight to the kitchen and started cooking. I seasoned a thick ribeye, got a cast iron pan smoking hot, and cooked it exactly how I liked it, medium rare with a perfect crust. Made myself roasted asparagus with garlic, a loaded baked potato, the whole thing. The smell filled the house, and I saw Ryan peek into the kitchen with this curious look. "That smells really good," he said. "What are you making?" I told him it was just dinner for myself, nothing special. Linda appeared in the doorway a minute later, and I could feel her watching me as I plated everything. "You made steak?" she asked, and there was something in her voice, not quite hurt, but definitely surprised. "Yeah," I said casually. I was hungry after work. She waited like she expected me to offer her some, but I just took my plate, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and went to eat in the small office room we had that I'd basically turned into my space. I heard her go back to the living room without saying anything else. Saturday morning, I got up early, made myself a real breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese, bacon, toast, fresh orange juice, the kind of breakfast I used to make for everyone on weekends. Linda came into the kitchen while I was eating, still in her pajamas, and looked at the pan I'd already washed and put away. "You made breakfast?" she asked. "For myself, yeah," I said, taking another bite. "There's eggs and stuff in the fridge if you want to make some." She just stood there for a second, and I could see her brain trying to figure out what was happening. "You're not making any for us?" she asked, and now there was definitely an edge to her voice. I looked at her calmly and repeated the exact words she'd said to me 2 nights before. "You're an adult," I said. "Cook for yourself." Her face went through about 3 different expressions: shock, anger, and then this forced neutrality, like she didn't want to give me the satisfaction of a reaction. She grabbed a yogurt from the fridge and left without another word. That's when I knew this was going to get interesting. The kids asked me later if I wanted to go with them to the community pool, and I told them I had some errands to run, which was true. I needed to go to the hardware store and get some things for the house. But the real reason was I wanted to establish that I wasn't automatically available for family activities anymore, not when nobody seemed to care if I was included or not. Sunday evening, Linda announced she was taking Ryan and Sophie to a movie, some animated thing they'd been wanting to see. She didn't ask if I wanted to come, just told me they were going. "Okay, have fun," I said, and texted my buddy Ethan to see if he wanted to grab dinner and watch the game at this sports bar we used to go to before I got married. We had a great time, wings and beer and talking about normal stuff, and I didn't think about home once for those 3 hours. When I got back around 9:30, Linda was in the living room waiting for me with her arms crossed. "You went out?" she asked, like I'd committed some crime. "Yeah, you guys went to the movies, so I met up with Ethan." I said. "We didn't invite you to the movies because you never want to see kids' films," she said, her voice rising. I thought maybe we could all do something together as a family tonight. I just looked at her. You planned the movie without asking me. I said, you didn't mention anything about doing something together afterward. How was I supposed to know? She didn't have an answer for that. She just turned around and went to the bedroom. That became the pattern for the next week. Monday, I came home from work, made dinner for myself, ate alone. Tuesday, Linda tried to make a nice dinner for everyone, including me, like she was trying to prove a point, but it felt forced and awkward. Wednesday, I started doing my own laundry separately, just my clothes, and left everyone else's in the hamper. Thursday, Linda asked me to pick up Ryan from soccer practice, and I told her I had plans, which I did. I'd scheduled a dentist appointment I'd been putting off for months. She had to rearrange her afternoon to get him, and she was furious. You never used to be like this, she said that night. Like what? I asked. Available? That's because I used to think I was part of a team. Now I realize I'm just the money guy who occasionally gets asked to do favors. Friday night was when things really escalated. I'd been tracking our joint bank account more carefully, something I hadn't paid much attention to before because I figured we were both adults managing money responsibly. But when I actually looked at the statements from the past 6 months, I saw a pattern that made my stomach turn. Hair salon appointments, new clothes, expensive skincare products, subscription boxes, frequent takeout orders on days when I wasn't home, all on the joint account that I was depositing my entire paycheck into while Linda's freelance income went to her personal account that I had no access to. There were charges for the kids too, which was fine. They needed things, but there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that was ever spent on me unless I bought it myself. Not a birthday gift, not a surprise dinner, not even a simple, thoughtful purchase like my favorite snacks or a book I mentioned wanting to read. I sat there looking at the numbers, doing the math in my head, and realized I'd been funding someone else's comfortable lifestyle while living like I was still a broke college kid saving every penny. The joint account was basically just my account that other people spent from. Linda had her freelance money tucked away safely while mine evaporated on everyone's needs but my own. I opened a separate checking account that Saturday, went to the bank in person, and set everything up. Starting the following week, I'd deposit just enough into the joint account to cover my share of the actual household bills, mortgage, utilities, groceries, and the rest would go into my own account. When Linda asked why I was at the bank so long, I told her I was looking into some investment options, which wasn't technically a lie. I was investing in my own financial independence. That Sunday, I spent most of the day in the garage organizing my tools and thinking. Ryan came out to help me for a while, handing me wrenches and asking questions about how different things worked, and it was the best conversation I'd had with anyone in the house for weeks. He didn't want anything from me except my time and attention, and I realized that's all I'd ever wanted from Linda too. Sophie brought me a drawing she'd made of our family, and in the picture I was standing slightly apart from everyone else, not intentionally, I think, just the way an 8-year-old naturally drew what she observed. I taped it to my toolbox and felt this heavy sadness settle over me. Even the kids could see I didn't really belong anymore. That night, lying in bed with Linda on the far side of the mattress like we were strangers, I had this thought that wouldn't leave me alone. In this house, in this family, I wasn't a husband or a partner or even really a parent figure to Ryan and Sophie despite 3 years of trying. I was a provider, a financial resource, someone who kept the machine running but wasn't actually part of the life that machine supported. Every interaction had become transactional. Every request was really a demand. Every day was just me showing up to fund a life I wasn't truly included in. I thought about that phrase Linda had used during our argument, "You never used to be like this," and I realized she was right. I never used to have boundaries. I never used to question where my money went or whether I was valued beyond my paycheck. I never used to expect basic consideration or care. I just gave and gave and gave, hoping eventually someone would notice and appreciate it. But that's not how it works. People don't appreciate what they don't value, and Linda had made it crystal clear that the only thing she valued about me was my ability to keep paying for everything. The man behind the paycheck? The guy who worked 14-hour shifts in 95-degree heat? The husband who just wanted someone to care if he came home exhausted and hungry? That person was invisible to her. And you know what the worst part was? I'd let it happen. I'd trained her to treat me this way by accepting less and less until there was almost nothing left. But I was done training her, done hoping things would magically improve, done being invisible in my own home. I was a financial sponsor for someone else's life, and that realization, as painful as it was, finally gave me the clarity I needed to figure out what came next. Monday morning, I called a family law attorney during my lunch break. His name was Robert Chen. Came highly recommended from a guy at work, and he agreed to see me that Wednesday. I left work early and drove to his office downtown. He was straightforward, no sugarcoating, just facts. We talked about the marriage, finances, the kids. When I explained Ryan and Sophie were from Linda's previous marriage and weren't biologically mine, he nodded like he'd heard this story before. The good news hit me like relief I didn't know I needed. My financial exposure was limited. The house was in my name only. My parents had given the down payment as a wedding gift to me, and I'd been paying the mortgage alone. Linda's freelance income went to her separate account while I deposited everything into our joint account. Robert said this worked in my favor. I could demonstrate inequitable contribution. Given the marriage was under 5 years, no biological children together, and the financial imbalance, I was looking at a clean separation. I sat in my truck afterward for 20 minutes, just thinking. This was real now. I could end this marriage without being destroyed financially. The question wasn't whether I could leave anymore, it was whether I should. I decided to give it one last honest conversation. That Saturday, I asked Linda to talk without the kids around. She got defensive immediately, but agreed. We sent Ryan and Sophie to her mom's and sat at the kitchen table. I laid everything out. The loneliness of working brutal hours and coming home to indifference, being treated like an ATM, carrying all financial weight while she kept her income separate, becoming invisible unless there was a bill to pay. I wasn't yelling, just explaining my reality. Linda listened, but her face hardened. When I finished, she told me I was overly sensitive, that she had a lot on her plate with kids and work. She said I chose my job, nobody forced me, and tried to make the cooking incident sound ridiculous. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I explained I wasn't upset about making dinner. I was upset about what it represented, the lack of care. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes, and I knew this conversation was pointless. But I had to ask one question. What am I to you, Linda? What am I besides the money? She opened her mouth quickly, then stopped. The pause stretched out, 10 seconds, 20. Finally she spoke. You're a good provider. The way she said it, like that was supposed to be enough, told me everything. Not a husband, not a partner, just a provider. I pulled out the divorce papers and set them on the table. Her face went white. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I couldn't be married to someone who only saw me as a bank account. She started crying, said we could fix this, that she could change. I reminded her I'd given her 3 years of chances. If I have to force you to love me, then it's not real, I said. She kept crying, but I'd heard enough empty promises. The next weeks were tense. I moved to the spare bedroom. Linda alternated between playing perfect wife and being angry. The kids knew something was wrong. One night Ryan asked if I was moving out. I sat with him and Sophie and explained that Linda and I had grown-up problems and needed to live separately. Sophie asked if they'd done something wrong, and I assured them this wasn't about them, that I still cared about them. Ryan asked if they'd still see me, and I promised absolutely. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. Quick process, nothing to fight over. The house was mine. Linda moved out with the kids. She tried one last time the day before leaving, dressed up and talking about reservations at our first date restaurant. I looked at her and felt only exhaustion. What we had ended a long time ago. I just finally accepted it. She left the next day, and the house went quiet. That was 6 months ago. I got promoted to senior technician with normal hours, started going to the gym, reconnected with old friends. Ryan and Sophie come over every other weekend, and it's genuinely good without the tension. Last week, Ethan asked if I was ready to date again. I told him maybe, but this time I'd never forget something important. The moment someone tells you to take care of yourself, believe them. They've already stopped caring. I spent 3 years hoping Linda would see me, and she never did because she didn't want to. She wanted a provider, nothing more. Next time I'll look for someone who wants to be a partner, someone who shows up because they want to. And if I never see that reciprocity, I won't waste years hoping it will appear. I'll walk away early, while I still have enough of myself left to build something better. That's the lesson I learned the hard way, but at least I learned it. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.